Hi there. This is Yukiko Amaya, and welcome to the live stream today, Wild Remembering Words to Ignite Our Soul. And I'm really excited to be able to come live to you at this time with our featured guest, Christine Watkins, who is a Storyteller Priestess. This live stream is part of Goddess and Energy Coming Alive, which is a podcast series with different women that I have met who are part of bringing about a new awareness and new consciousness through their different work of healing, storytelling, priestessing, and different work that they do out in the world. First and foremost, the power of story and the power of words are really important to me because our whole lives are understood oftentimes through the different stories that we tell ourselves. And in that way, it's possible to start to reframe and reshape reality, the way we understand ourselves and the way that we understand the world through different ways that we tell these stories to ourselves and to the world. So we'll be looking into that, and I'm really excited that you'll be able to join us. And first of all, I would like to do a short grounding and centering before I bring our featured guest on. And this is a sistrum. It's an ancient Egyptian instrument that was recreated by an American priestess who was really taken by this, by Tahaya. So just listen and relax, feeling into your breath, coming into this place of timelessness where we are connected with everything and everyone through all time, past, present, and future. And feeling into your belly, your womb space, and your heart center. I invite you to really start to drop your weight and your awareness down towards earth. And with each exhale, feeling this cord of energy dropping from your heart center through the womb down into Mother Earth, like the beautiful tree roots moving down into the aliveness and the grounding of earth. Sensing the stones and the bones buried deep and going down, feeling into the underground waterways and moving even further down, entering into the magma heart of Mother Earth, moving down into the center of Earth, and just simply breathing with her there. And that's it, and being breathed by her. And with your next inhale, gathering her energy, giving deep gratitude and thanks to Mother Earth, moving back up, bringing her energy back up with you through the magma, up and up, through the underground waterways, through the deep caverns of crystals and minerals, up through the bones and the roots, all the way back up into your own body, up through the womb, the solar plexus, and into your heart center. Breathing deeply, feeling her energy swirling in the heart center. And with your next inhale, your energy cord now moving up through your throat, your head, out through the crown, up into the sky, traveling out and out through the atmosphere. Excuse me. Into the deep, deep space. Feeling into the moon space, the star space, traveling towards your mother star, past the outer planets, the galaxies. And there she is, in the deep sky, and plunging into her fiery embrace. Right into the heart of Star Mother. Breathing with her, and being breathed by her. Resting in the timeless embrace of Star Mother. And with your next exhale, coming back down, back past all of the stars and the galaxies, through the mystery of space, traveling back past our outer planets, towards the blue planet, towards Mother Earth, traveling as you plunge into the atmosphere, back towards your own house, entering through the crown of your head, traveling down with your Star Mother energy, pouring into the heart center. And there, the three fires of earth, star, and your own soul coming together, swirling, opening you into the magic and the presence of eternal time, where the seen and the unseen worlds come together. So, welcome. And I would love to now bring Christine Watkins into the studio with us. Welcome, Christine.
Hello, thank you, Yukiko. Your voice is so beautiful, I could have listened to it for ages.
Oh, thank you so much. Excuse me. So I want to welcome all of you who have joined us, and please let us know where you are joining in from. And that would be wonderful. I'm here in Northern Virginia, in the land of the Manahoac people of the Monacan Confederacy. And Christine, where are you joining us from?
I'm in the marches between the marches between Wales and England. I'm just on the English side of the border in the south, and I'm right out in the country. And I should tell you that it's extremely cold here, and I'm quite remote. And sometimes on a remote cold night, we get an unexpected power cut. So if I disappear suddenly, that's what's happening.
Okay. Okay. Well, Christine, first of all, you know, I know that you are a storyteller priestess, and you're also a sister priestess of Avalon. But I was thinking, you know, would you like to let all of us know what you do and who you are? Tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words.
Oh, well. So for most of my working life, I've been involved in the performing arts, specifically as a wordsmith of one kind or another, mainly writing initially for broadcast and live media, so film, TV, radio, theatre. I originally trained in theatre in Welsh and English language, and I was a theatrical performer for a while in a theatre company. And despite the fact that my early training in theatre involved a lot of physical work, where we weren't even allowed to talk for long periods of time, so it was very imagistic and physical. It was clear to me from early on that I had always had a love from earliest childhood for and an intrigue to listen to words being spoken, to listen to and read, most of all to listen to hear the way people speak, and that my work lay in that direction. So I continue to work primarily as a writer and spoken word artist. And I'm trying to I always have to pause for a moment when I think back to how long I've been doing this. I suppose I've been doing this for about 45 years as a professionally, and it's changed and mutated in the way the things I've been drawn to do, and the things that have come my way, the opportunities that have come my way have changed and altered slightly, but they've always really centered around this core intrigue, the feeling of the intrigue of what we speak. And, the feeling of, again, since childhood, of the sacred in the everyday, in our everyday speech. And so currently I work as a story weaver, still in different formats, but exploring Goddess as she seems to me, as she manifests to me, and as I observe her and as I hear her. So and that still results in me doing various different things. Performing in festivals and various events, and I run a course for Glastonbury Goddess Temple on story weaving, because I'm really interested in how unique our voices are and the different ways in which we can use them and word weave. It's not a vocal training, but it's a wordsmith and a story weaving training. So it's its own unique thing. And I began offering that this year, and will continue next year, because it's a joy to work with other people.
Wow, yeah. I would love to do that, but will you be doing an online thing?
At the moment, I did quite a bit of online work, like most people during lockdown. But at the moment, it's such a joy to me to work in person that as much as I can, I'm working in person again. Right. And so for the time being, there will be maybe some online offering, but that main course will be in person.
Great. And hi, Marcy. Marcy's hailing in from Dula Plain, Virginia. Yes. So, well, story weaving. Maybe Christine, would you like to give us an example of a story weaving? I don't know, like a little story of something that might start us.
Yeah, sure.
this time of the season, or I don't know, anything that comes to you?
Okay, well, I was thinking, one of my preoccupations recently has been, over the last couple of years really, has been thinking about the vocabularies that are passed down to us, the obvious spoken vocabularies and the hidden vocabularies that are passed down to us, in particular through the mother line. And I started to write a few little pieces about this, exploring this. And okay, so I won't say anything more about it for the time being, but I'll just give you a little tiny little example of one of these pieces. So far, the pieces I have are quite fragmentary, and but have recently been published as part of a bigger volume, which I can tell you about later if you'd like. So this piece is called Yard Story, and it's part of my musings really about how we inherit our vocabularies. There was a little old woman, and she was standing in a concrete yard that was shared by her house and her daughter's house. And it was early in the morning, but she'd already been there for quite a few hours. And around her body, there was tightly wrapped a shawl with long fringes. It's what's called a shawl vaggy in Welsh. A shawl in which you wrap and carry the baby whilst leaving one arm free to go about your duties. And from inside the shawl came the almost uninterrupted sound of grizzling. Now, the old woman...
Of what? Of?
Grizzling.
Grizzling.
Yes. And the old woman paid very little attention to the sound. Every now and then, she would shift her weight slightly from one foot to the other, but you wouldn't have called it rocking. And from time to time, she would sigh and mutter something under her breath, something that was almost tuneful, but you wouldn't really have called it a lullaby. And still, the grizzling continued. And the morning wore on. The old woman looked across to her daughter's house, but made no effort to cross the yard. She sighed. She muttered to herself, "Dyr o gan yn fy mron o dduw y deisio ni," and took a few steps towards the only tree which had persevered and grown to maturity in that concrete yard. And it was a pear tree. And so there they were, under the pear tree, the old woman, the fringed shawl, and the uninterrupted sound of grizzling. Now, this pear tree, well, no partridges had ever visited it. But from time to time, it was the occasional favourite haunt of an owl that flew in from the forest. And indeed, as the light began to ebb away, in flew the owl on silent wings and took up its perch in the pear tree. The owl fixed its gaze out along the garden path. And on that path there was a crossing point where mice scurried back and forth. And every now and then the owl would lift silently from the branch and swoop and pounce and return with a fat mouse in its beak. And it would sit there digesting. And every now and then it would give a loud, mournful hoot. And every time it did so, the grizzling that had been coming from inside the shawl was replaced by a listening silence. And every time the grizzling started again, it was a little quieter. And so it continued all through the night hours. The owl's silent flight, the mournful hooting, the listening silence from the shore. And all the time, the little old woman stood unflinching. Earthworms bumped beneath the soles of her feet. Tree roots twined. Earthworms laced between the eyelets of her boots. Leaves from the pear tree seemed to tickle and get under her shawl where it touched her neck. But still she stood. And as the morning light began to appear, the owl flew away to its daytime roost in the wood. And the old woman listened, and all that she could hear coming from the shawl was a gentle, contented snoring. The old woman nodded. She crossed the yard to her daughter's house to see if there was any breakfast going. The child, she said to herself, is melancholic, but it's a keeper. Okay.
Wow.
So
That's
that story I've been working on, looking in particular at the what we pick up when we're tightly wrapped in the carrying shawl. What we pick up from the world even before we can speak ourselves, what we hear and what we take into ourselves.
That's wonderful. It's excuse me, it made me go into a dreaming. It's like a dreaming, you know, of the silent owls and being able to become part of that nature, of the rhythm of nature speaking. Because English is not my native tongue, but I've never heard the word grizzling before. Is that sort of like a crying or a complaining?
Grizzling is isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Grizzling is it's that irritating sound that small children, babies and small children, can keep up for hours and hours and hours and can drive you to distraction. It's kind of usually that sort of particular complaining, sort of wordless grizzling. I can't think of another I'm not sure. It's not quite. I know in French, sometimes you hear mothers say, "Tu réclames toujours." It's not exactly that. It's more less defined than that, but yeah.
It, for some reason, for me, because when growing up as a young child in Japan, the babies used to be carried on the mother's backs with a very it was a strap system. It wasn't a shawl, but it was a strap system that then the mother would tie in front, and you would be kind of really tight. Nowadays people carry the baby like heart to heart in front, but before it was in the back. And the sense of seeing the world from that place, of receiving the world from that place. And I haven't really thought about that in a long, long time, but it came back to me when you were telling that story. There's a sense of being, I don't know, a sense of being carried through that was so peaceful in a way, that, but, for you, Christine, and if there are any questions or comments or things that was evocative to you, please bring it up in the comments and we'll be able to see it. For those of you listening, you were talking about the words coming down from the mother line.
Mm.
So in the story that you just told, what were the words and the expressions coming down from the mother line that you felt that you were weaving into the story?
I think I wouldn't assign a specific, well, clearly one of them is grizzling.
Yeah. And also that shawl that you're talking about, yeah?
Yeah, sure, Baggy. It's not that if when I'm making a story, it's offering whoever hears it will different words will be activated or different feelings. It's not, I wouldn't prescribe a particular glossary as such to any individual story, but this, in that story, I think I was thinking probably more of even before of a very, in my mind, that's a small baby, and it's before it. I think the hoot of an owl is the same as other words to that baby.
That's it's really fascinating how a story can, as you say, evoke. And just as much as it evoked for me, that moment of comfort when I was carried, and it wasn't my mother who was carrying me. It was my she was a nanny that had a very sturdy back, and
I think that's the thing in that baby carriers are probably the first ever tool that humanity used, some way of carrying your baby strapped to you, and every different culture and every different time will have its own version depending on what materials are available. But the interesting thing about it as well is that it's kind of the next step on from the baby in the womb. It's still intimate, but actually anyone can have the shawl wrapped around them. In that story, it was the grandmother. It often was a grandparent. It could be a grandfather. It could be anyone else, but it's to say it's the next kind of step along in that intimate sort of duo. So I thought
it is, isn't it? Yes, because like you come out of the womb, and then in the old days you would be held very close to the person. I remember one of my friends saying that when she was a baby, her grandfather would carry her inside his kimono, so that she would be warm. He would kind of tuck her into the kimono and carry her that way. If any of you listening have a remembrance of how you were carried, or how you carried your baby, or how you were carried, put it into the comments, because it is in a way our introduction into the world, isn't it? And the sounds that we hear at that time, just as much as the sounds that we hear in the womb, can be very, very different, how it wires us into understanding the sounds in the world. Just, thinking about that, and thinking about the different languages that create the way that we connect with and we see the world. Do you remember the first word that your child spoke?
I don't remember the first word. I remember it inside, I think, but it's not in my conscious memory.
Do you remember I mean, I remember when the first thing that my parents said to me, because I have memories that go back to when I was in the crib. I remember my father and mother looking in, and they kept on pointing to their nose, and they would go, "Mama," and then my father would go, "Papa," and I kept on wondering, why is the nose these two different words? But when you are creating story, when you are starting to create story, because I think many of us who have gone through shamanic work or therapy work have been told about how we need to get away from our story, you know, that we have this kind of a story that's fixed in place in the way that we see ourselves. We have our life story, and to start to peel ourselves away from that so that we can free ourselves from these constraints of a certain way of telling story. And I was wondering how you work with, when you are creating a story, how you craft and weave the words together.
Well, I think playfully is one way I do it. I should say that I don't necessarily weave from scratch. I don't necessarily devise work from scratch. I also do work with a body of a story that exists, which might be folk tales or stories from all. I could take stories from all over the place, but to work with and share. But I do. It's true that I do weave together quite a lot of my own work, my own stories, and I tend to do it still quite physically and live into the story a bit.
Oh, that's fantastic. Like, how would you do that?
Well, really, you know, you can go, it depends on what, it depends on, I talk to myself a lot. I talk to myself, and whoever it occurs to me is in the room at the time, or whoever I summon there to be there I try and get an equivalent of a rehearsal room. And I can just work at my desk as well, sometimes internally, very internally, but I do like to externalize to build the work.
That's really fascinating to me, because here's Christina, who says, I remember my father would carry me on his shoulders so I could see the world from above, just like he did. That's wonderful, Christina. Because, you know, it's because I am a mover. I feel like the body holds a lot of information. And sometimes by freeing the body, the story can shift. You know, when I work with people, and we tend to have like this stuck point of view about something. And by moving, it suddenly shifts that stuck place into a much more fluid place.
Yes.
And so the story that we tell ourselves internally starts to shift. And so I'm fascinated that when you're crafting, you know, because I'm really curious as to that process as well when you're crafting. Can you like think of an example of like when something was stuck and something that you did enabled you to move through as you were crafting the story?
I think there are many small. It's kind of a constant process, really, of moving through and then discarding and deciding what you move on with, and trying to find out what rings true in a story and what doesn't. I mean, it's quite unremarkable a process in a way, in that if you were to be a fly on the wall and look from above, it might seem as if I was just spending a long time either walking or running around a room, muttering to myself. So, So it's fairly hard to put into words, really, but yes, it's a constant series of mini breakthroughs, really, or realizing that you stuck with something, that there's something you can't get past, so you have to go around it, and that the story might have to change. Yeah.
There was something that we were talking about that really fascinated me, because you are multilingual. You speak, I think English is your first language, right?
Yeah.
That you learned initially, and then Welsh, and then
Yeah.
French.
Yeah.
And Japanese was my first, and then English, and then French. But we were talking about how different languages resonate in different ways through us. I remember when I was trying to learn how to sing, and I went to a French singing coach way back when, back in the 80s somewhere, and he said, "Okay, well, sing me this." And he said, it was "Le ciel est bleu." So I said, "Le ciel est bleu," and he said, "No, it's not well placed. It's too high up." He said, "What's your mother tongue?" I said, "I don't know. I speak English a lot." And he said, "Okay, say it in English." So I said, "The sky is blue." He said, "Ah, that's better, but it's still not what you heard in your mother's womb." I said, "Oh, that would be Japanese." And he said, "Okay, say the sky is blue in Japanese." And so I said, "Aoi sora." And you can hear it, right? It just drops in a little bit deeper. And so that was very fascinating to me, that even on the physical level of when we learned the language, it on the cell level, it seems to be placed in different places in our body. But also, as you talk about physically moving in order to get the story, how different languages might, I don't know, discover different energy fields within you.
Yeah.
Does that?
Yes, I think, I mean, it's my experience that it feels very different. Although French is kind of a third language, it's very much a learned language for me. Nevertheless, I had learned it pretty thoroughly by my teens, I think, and was certainly by my late teens. I went to work in France for a while, and it was a working language for me and a living language. And I don't know if it's the fact that I learned it in my teens as a very young, boisterous woman, that I learned the language in my teens, or that is something innate, or something to do with the relationship of that language and me. But I feel very different when I'm telling in French. I feel far more free and joyful in general, regardless of what story I'm telling. It's a different quality to it. And yes, I don't really know what the reason is, because certainly my vocabulary in French is much, much smaller than my vocabulary in English or Welsh even, but it's very different feel to the telling.
Yeah, that's really true, because I was just thinking of the story of Amaterasu, of the
Yeah.
sun goddess, and how
Yes.
she hides in the cave,
Yeah, it's a beautiful
which
story.
is very much about this time of the year,
Yeah.
of the sun, going darker, and the world starts to die down, and how that. But anyway, that telling that story in Japanese is a very different experience from telling it in English, for example. And it's the it's, I have a sense that each language had a way or a sound that would allow us to enter into this sacred space of listening and understanding, and it would also activate something within us that's very, very different of how we enter into that. Is that what you also experienced?
It is my experience. Yeah, I mean, I love language, so I would love to master more languages. But whether I do or not in this lifetime, they would obviously be something I'd learned later. But I do think it is very true that each must have some kind of hold some different gateway.
So when do you also story tell? Because I know that you're part of Beyond the Border. There's a storytelling conference in Wales.
Yeah, there's a storytelling festival which happens in Wales. It's an international storytelling festival. It's been running for many, many years, and it brings together artists from all over the world in a weekend of telling. And this year again, I'll be part of this festival. I'll be telling there, and I can thoroughly recommend a visit if anyone's interested, because there's so many different tellers from different cultures and different backgrounds turn up and weave their tales.
And what's the feeling of being there and like really, really being taken by story? What happens? What happens when we're taken by story? What happens when you're taken by story, Christine?
That's a difficult question. I mean, it's.
I mean, as a weaver, and also as a listener, what happens? Do you feel for you?
Well, as a listener, sometimes I feel very moved and very connected. Sometimes I feel grumpy if I don't like the telling. But I usually feel story as a bridge, and as a journey, and as a bridge. As a teller myself, I feel, particularly if I can just shunt my self-critical aspect out of the way. As a teller, I often feel very elated and very exhausted after telling. As it's playful work, but it's work. It's the work.
Do you feel like when you are connected in with this story thread, is it something like you're drawing something out from what we might call the other world, of the unseen world, right? Because in a way, story is sort of like that threshold space where you're drawing something from the unseen world and bringing it towards manifestation. What is it? Because, you use the word weaving, which is a very magical term.
It's the unspoken world, perhaps, as well. It's hearing the unspoken world. It's hearing I think as a very young child, and this may be true for many people who are linguists or interested in language or words. As a very young child, one of my earliest memories was listening to the pattern of how people speak and thinking, that's what they're saying, but there's something reverberating behind it, and feeling that really strongly and thinking, well, I wonder what that is. What is that thing that is the speaking behind the speaking? What is it? And you could think about it in terms of meaning. People say something and there's another meaning or meanings behind it. It was that in part as I began to learn what words meant, but also it was a bit more like the tip of the iceberg, and wondering what the iceberg was underneath that was pulsating in this way, and that was part of something hidden or unspoken. And so for me, if the word when spoken activates our awareness of that and of belonging to the unseen or unspoken, then that's the work. That's the work and the play. And that's what storytelling is, the bridge to, for me.
Between the spoken and the unspoken. That's really fascinating, because I didn't think about the unspoken. I kind of look at it as the unseen, but it's true. Whether it's words or vision or touch, there's something that is behind that which is on the surface. sort of like looking at the surface of the ocean, but yet there's so much underneath, or the surface of the earth even, and there's so much that's underneath. I never really thought about the unspoken, which is really, it's that deep listening, isn't it? In a way, it's that capacity to listen deeply.
Yes, it's the first work of the, as I point out in my course, it's the first work of the storyteller really is to listen. And you have to be a dreadful eavesdropper if you if you want to be a storyteller. You really need to be able to be a connoisseur of eavesdropping until you've got a whole kind of library of eavesdropped sounds and words and phrases and situations and so on at your disposal, like you would have a color palette or like you would have a visual memory. Yes, you need all those things. So it's listening. It is.
So when you teach your course, so if that's the first thing, what would be like the second thing that you would say for those who would like to start to weave?
Well, you know, I can't tell you that. You'll have to come and I don't want to entice you. No, it's generally it's very. I mean, I don't want to teach, even if I could, even if I had the skill to. I don't want to try and teach people to work in the same way as me. I want them to work to discover how they want to work, really, and discover what their voice and in story might be. And storytelling is so many different things. It's not just performance storytelling. There are people who use storytelling in healing, people who just use story to understand or within a small circle to speak within a small circle or to empower their practice in some way. So it's really all different ways of how we might discover how we would like to work with our speaking voice. That's the only prerequisite, really, that you wish to use your speaking voice. And not, I suppose, the second thing is that we do not read from texts, or only very, very briefly. So it's about speaking. It's about memory. Memory.
Wow. So that
not
makes
learning
me
things word perfectly necessarily at all, but the way of learning as a story weaver, learning the patterns. And
that really brings back, because it brings back the time of when I was learning Sanskrit chants. And when I was very deeply, I'm still a yogi, but when I was really deeply immersed in that. And I remember studying with a Vedic astrologer, and he was saying, everything that I'm saying is also a transmission. So therefore, I don't want you to take notes, because when you start to take notes, a part of your brain goes away into this other thing, and you're no longer really listening, because part of the listening has to do with receiving energy. And none of the old societies really wrote, did they? Like the Druids didn't write. And
no, certainly not primarily.
No, and a lot of the traditions were passed down orally, and so they were the bards and the storytellers. There was also something sacred about the power of the story that they held, which the ancients recognized. And so it's really fascinating to start to reclaim that power of the word by not reading from something that's written, but by really coming on board as it's a whole. I think when you read, it just becomes words. A lot of the energy is only here, but when you are really presenting, then the power of the word takes your entire body. Those who can really recount a tale. And there's a completely different reception that starts to happen.
Yeah.
There's another thing that, and before we finish, I also want you to tell us another story about this time of the year, perhaps, or something that comes to you, to a story for those who are listening to take with them, to see what kind of resonance it might awaken. And this might be off subject, but there is a wonderful shamanic writing teacher called Dina Metzger, whom I've studied for many years with. Excuse me. And she's right now very much about talking of the literature of restoration. So for her, it's much more about the written word than the spoken. But talking about, and I encourage all of us actually to really think about this, because we tend to use words and language like riding a bicycle or even driving a car. It's become automatic in a way, and each of us have a way of doing something that's very automatic, and so we use words automatically without really thinking about their power or the consequence of how that weaves. Another teacher that I worked with, Don Miguel Ruiz, always used to say, words are magical. That's why, magical spells and things were done through words, but that words create reality. And therefore, words have power. And so whatever you speak comes into material reality. So to become really aware of what it is that you are actually saying or that you are writing, and to start to, with Dina, she's talking about the language of restoration, to start to restore nature back to health. We need to start to look at the way that we speak and write and listen. It's a very powerful way, because if we're going to shift the reality that we live in, then perhaps we need to start to look at how we keep on recreating that reality by the words that we choose, or the understanding that lies behind the words. And perhaps that we need to listen beyond the spoken to start to bring out the fibers of the weaving that creates a different kind of connection, or a different kind of reality that we might be able to create. So that was a big blah blah, but yeah. So for those of you who would like to find out more about what Christine does, this is her website address. It's christinewatkins.co.uk. She also has, there's a new book that's come out that has, it's an anthology from what I understand, and Christine is one of the contributors in the anthology. And we'll put up a link to be able to, for you to read what she has written in the Facebook comments afterwards. So come back and do check that out, because it's a long link from what Christine has told me. And also those of you who are interested in connecting with different kinds of ways of looking at the world that is behind the veil, go to mygoddesspath.com and click on rituals, and there will be different ceremonies, the upcoming ceremonies that'll be there. The next ceremony coming up is the new moon winter solstice ceremony that I'll be leading at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the 22nd of December. It's another way of entering into connection with the unseen world. So, okay, so without further ado, I would like to hand over the story. Unless there's any questions or any comments from those of you listening, if you have any questions that you might like to ask, please put it into the comments right now. And we'll see if we can address that. But okay, so let's have you, Christine,
okay,
take us out with a story.
Right. Well, this is a very short and very simple story that I share with as many people as I can. And I ask that they share it with as many people as they can too, because like many stories, this is to be shared. So long ago, long ago, there were two women out walking the ways of the world. And one of the women was dressed in a beautiful, bright cloak of all the sparkling colours that you could imagine. And as she went along the road, she would sometimes call at a house, knock on the door. And when she knocked at a door, the door would be flung open and she would be welcomed inside. And she would be given something to drink and something to eat and offered a place by the fire or a bed for the night if she wanted one. The other woman was more somberly dressed in deep, plain colours. And as she walked the ways, sometimes she would stop at a house, knock at the door. But when she did so, she was not easily invited in. She was seldom given a drink or something to eat. She was rarely invited in and offered a place by the fire, or offered a bed for the night, or a seat around the table. And these two women went their ways far and wide, but their paths never crossed until one day it just so happened that they found themselves approaching the same crossroads. And for the first time, they came face to face. And they nodded at one another, and they looked at one another. And the woman in the deep, plain clothes said to the woman in the bright, sparkling cloak, "I have seen you in the distance, and I have seen how when you stop by a house and knock at the door is flung open and you are welcomed in, and you are given a drink and food, and you are invited in to sit by the fire. Tell me, what's your name?" And the woman in the bright cloak said, "My name is Story. But I have seen you. I have seen you walking the way. I have seen you stop by a house and knock at the door, and I have seen that you are not invited in. The door is not easily opened for you. You're not offered a drink or something to eat or a place by the fire or a bed for the night. Tell me, what is your name?" And the woman in the deep, plain clothes said, "My name is Truth." And the two women looked into one another's eyes and opened wide their arms and embraced one another. And Story opened wide her cloak and she said, "I will tell you how we will go from now on. We will walk together as we walk the ways. And when we come to a house, you will come under my multicolored cloak. And wherever I am invited in, you will be invited into." And so they did. And so it was. So it was long ago, and so it still is today. So that you can be sure that whenever you invite story into your home or into your heart, somewhere beneath the multicolored folds of that cloak, you have invited truth in too. And so that story was given to me, and so I give it to you, and so I ask you to share it wherever you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. That's marvelous. Thank you. Thank you. And what a wonderful time of the year, as we move towards winter solstice and the Christmas times and the Hanukkah times and the different traditions of gathering that we have around the fire, to be able to share this story, that truth goes hand in hand. If you listen deeply enough to a story, it's right there. It's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank you, Marcy. Marcy says this has been wonderful and inspiring. So that's wonderful. And so this is Christine's email address. And again, her link to her book, I will put into the Facebook as well as the YouTube comments area later on. And for those of you who are interested in the storytelling conference in Wales, go to beyondtheborder.com. Whereabouts in Wales is it, and what time of the year does it happen, Christine?
It's in mid Wales, and it's in later on in the summer in June. So if you go to that, so you'll see all the information on there.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so very much. And thank you, everybody, for listening in. And this will be put up onto the podcast of my, it's Goddess and Energy Coming Alive. So anywhere you get your podcast, if you type in Goddess and Energy Coming Alive, you'll be able to re-listen, and all of the other live stream conversations that I've had with really amazing women are all on there as well. And Christina says, imagine the power they would have if they would walk together. Yes. Yes. If story and truth walk together all the time within us, whenever we tell the story or a story. And Diane says, thank you for sharing your thoughts and time and adding to this story, Yukiko Christine. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
And is there an audible recording of your storytelling, Christine? Is there an audible recording?
You mean on Audible, not on Audible, but when it is audible, yes.
Yeah. A recorded version of different stories. Is it on your website?
Actually, yes, there may be some. I can't remember at this precise moment what there is on my website. I think there are some. Yes, there is some storytelling on that, and there's some on Bandcamp as well, and various stories on Bandcamp, and also maybe I can give some links to Yukiko, and she can post them on Facebook.
I can post it. Yeah, Bandcamp would. If you go to Bandcamp, would they like plug in your name?
Christine Watkins and Bandcamp. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, and may all of you have a wonderful, wonderful time of winter solstice and going into dream time. And may the story and truth walk together on your path. Thank you so much, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you.